Hello and welcome for another summer school class brought to you by eToro. I am Sam North, the trading school lead, and today we will be answering the question, what should your investment goals be? We will answer some of the following questions. Why is it important to have goals? How can you come up with them? And why is it important to think longer term and also be realistic? We will also look at some useful stats throughout history which can help us choose our goals and also discuss why over time our investing goals can change. To our first question, why is it important to have goals, and specifically, why is it important to have investment goals? Well, setting investment goals can benefit us by providing clarity of our investing journey. It can offer motivation and, of course, create a clear plan for us all to follow. You might be thinking, is there actually any theory to back up setting goals in investing? It is all well and good saying we should do it, but is there actually any proof that it is worth doing? Of course there is. A 1979 study by and of MBA students is one of such instances that is frequently cited. Only 3% of the graduating class had written goals and plans for achieving them. 13% had unwritten goals and 84% had none at all. The students with unwritten ambitions were making, on average, twice as much money after 10 years as the ones with no goals at all. The small proportion of students who had defined goals made 10 times as much money as all the other students put together. You aren't alone if you've ever thought investing sounds hard, nerve-wracking, or tough to do. But hopefully with these classes you can feel more confident, and by also setting goals you can realise your investing journey and how to get there. Okay, so we know that it is beneficial to have goals, but that probably hasn't surprised too many of you. If you think about your everyday job or even a Premier League footballer, you and them will have goals too, especially if you want to progress well. But how do we come up with our goals? How many of you have heard of SMART goals? Shout out to my PE teacher, Mr. Clement, for first bringing this to my attention when I'd have been about 16 years old. SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. I'm not going to give you a definition for each of those words as they are all pretty self-explanatory, but let's look at an example you might have for your investing. For someone who can afford to invest £200 a month, you could say, I want to have 40,000 in my investment account in 10 years' time, which I can put towards a new house. It's very specific. It's measurable because we have a clear amount we are after. It is achievable based on what we already know about compound interest, and it is relevant to what we need and also has a clear time period on the goal. Of course, this is just one example, but it can really help to have one, and it gives you the motivation to see it through. So ask yourself, why am I investing? Is it for a house? Is it for my retirement? Is it for a better quality of life? Determine your why and create goals to go along with it. To help determine that why, you can write down each of your investing goals you have on a piece of paper, for example, along with a description of how you plan to track your progress. Consider both short and long-term goals while creating a detailed list. Assume that in addition to saving for retirement, you also want to buy a house in a desirable area and have some money left over for the occasional trip. Review your present financial condition now, taking note of how well you've managed your finances thus far and the actions you're prepared to take to accomplish that list of objectives. That could mean saving more, investing more, being more risk averse, being more diversified, or even taking more risk. Again, make sure you have a clear plan and goals to follow. From a personal perspective, I want to have enough money in my investment accounts to retire early and live comfortably. I have a figure in mind for what I would need to achieve and an age that I would like to retire by. I have used stats and compound interest calculations to work out what I would need to invest per month in order to reach my goals. Once I realised that it could be realistic, I then set out on my plan. Cross your fingers for me. Now let's answer the question on why it is important to think longer term. You've all just heard my cunning plan to retire early, but importantly, it was a long-term plan. Remember from the previous class where I said markets generally go up over time, but timing the market in the short term is really tricky? Well, that is why. We would all love to become multi-millionaires overnight and retire early and drive off into the sunset, but in reality, that's incredibly unlikely to happen. By regularly investing, being patient, reinvesting your returns, and being disciplined in your approach, you can help increase the chances of growing your investments. So what could be some long-term goals? You might say, I want to make on average 10% a year over the next 20, 30 years. Is this realistic? Well, the US stock market makes 10% a year on average. So in theory, if you just invested in that, you have a good chance. Or you might say, I want to make a certain amount of money in a certain amount of time. Goals should be personal, and your goals that you might think of right now could be very different to mine. Some people with children may say, I want to give all my children a certain amount of money when I retire that they can then put towards their first house. Let's say that number is 50 grand and they have 3 children. They can then work out how much money they would have to invest per month and for how long based on the average returns thereafter. Now, it is important that we say, just because you have goals, you aren't necessarily going to achieve them. I know I sound a bit like a dream killer there, but of course, this is the reality. You know, I've been wishing all my life I could be 6 foot, and it hasn't happened yet. So, this leads us on quite nicely to our next point. How can we use history and stats to make realistic goals? We have already covered what the average stock market return is, so there is already a good base to go from. We can use that 10% average return to help calculate how much we could make in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and so on. As we always say, past performance isn't indicative of future results, but it can help us have a good guide. In our last video, we looked at 3 different types of portfolios, one that was more risky, one that was more balanced, and one that was more cautious in comparison. The stats of each of these can also help us plan our investment goals. If you are early on in your investing career, you may favour the riskier approach to try and build wealth, but as we get closer to retirement, we might focus on maintaining it instead. Now look, this isn't investment advice, but from a personal point of view, I'm using the next 10 years of my life to be more risky, the 10 years after that to be more balanced, and then in 20 years' time, I'm looking to be more cautious to help preserve my capital. As mentioned at the beginning of the video, your goals can change over time, and there is nothing wrong with that. In order to achieve certain longer term goals, someone might need a bigger percentage of their portfolio in stocks due to the higher volatility. Stocks in general have higher returns than bonds throughout a market cycle, which typically lasts about 7 years. More on that in a future video. For instance, a 35-year-old investor might have 80% or even more of their portfolio in equities, depending on their circumstances and state of the market. That age group could probably handle the heightened stock volatility. However, if someone's goal is shorter term, the investor should probably assume less market risk, especially if their goal is less than a complete market cycle away, to reduce the likelihood that stocks will see a significant decrease around the time when the investor would need to convert their investments into cash. An equity or stock allocation of just 20-30% may be more beneficial for someone who will rely on their investment portfolio during their retirement. These are just a couple of examples, but you can see how someone's goals will change depending on their age or where they are or what they want from life. Hopefully, this video will now make you understand why having investment goals is beneficial and also what your investment goals could be. It's important to make them personal for you, to make them realistic, but also don't be afraid to change them along the way. Our next video is all about choosing what to invest in. I'm off to the beach. See you next time.